What I'm going to talk about today is design thinking. Why I want to talk about it? Because I'm really passionate about design thinking, because I believe it's a tool that will help us build a better future for ourselves. And since I won't be able to build this better future by myself, I want to share as much as I know with you so that you could help me do this together. And who am I first? I'm an interaction designer. I'm from Bulgaria. My name is Mariana. I've been working at SAP for the last 5 years. Started as a developer, but 3 years ago I found a much bigger challenge in making a good usable product and not thinking how to develop them, but to think how to bring more value to the users that will be using them. And having said this, let's start directly with design thinking, as any design thinking workshop starts with a warm-up game. Since we don't have a lot of space here, because I would wanted to just to start and walk around in the room, let's make the game with your hands. So please, all of you, free up your hands. The game is like this. When I tell you left, you need to raise your right hand. And when I tell you right, you need to raise your left hand. Okay, that's simple, right? Let's try if it's gonna work. So left, left, right, left, right, 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 left, left, right. Okay, I think you're getting good at this. So let's make it a little bit harder. So when I tell you to clap, you need to scream "Ole!" And when I tell you raise a hand, you need to clap. So there are already 4 activities that you need to do. So left, right, clap, right hand, right hand, right hand, clap, clap, right, left. Okay, I think you're all getting really good at this, and I won't make it any harder, so let's stop until now. But that was a concentration game. Usually at every design thinking workshop, we start with a game that's appropriate to what we will do next. So in this case, I want, since you're all very tired already, I wanted you to concentrate a bit so that you could listen everything carefully. And okay, let me start then. So 3 years ago, I started my design thinking journey, arriving at a workshop where we had to design some application for quality management, and I had no clue what is design thinking, and was curious to know before I go to the workshop to see what the hell are we going to do there. So what I did first, I started searching for some definitions of design thinking online, and I found a lot of definitions from Hasso-Plattner Institute, from some D-School directors, and eventually came up to SAP definition. But what was common between all those definitions is that design thinking had 3 key aspects. And the first key aspect was the space. And by saying the space, I mean the place that we will be working. It should be a space that gives you the freedom to explore. It gives you the freedom to try anything that you could imagine, and as a kid doesn't afraid to make a mistake, to fill in this space in such a way so that you could come up to the wildest idea that you could that you wouldn't imagine that you could come to such solutions. Then the second key ingredient are the people that are in the team of T-shaped people. Do you know what T-shaped means? Okay, so T-shape is in the form of the T. Every one of us have soft skills that are applicable to any environment. On whatever job you're doing, it would always be valuable to have communication skills, to be able to work in a team, to be able to solve problems. Those are the skills that are applicable to any job. And then the deep expertise skills, those are the things that we have graduated, for example, or for example, in my case, I'm expert in informatics, UI design, user experience design. So those are the skills that we bring to the table. And having an interdisciplinary team, that creates the power of the team that he can find a solution to any problem. And then the third critical aspect is the approach that we will be using to find a solution to the challenge that we have accepted. And that's the approach. The approach that we currently define in 6 steps. And if you notice, the first 3 of them, or at least the half of them, is focused on the problem space. And that's really important because as humans, we always tend to jump into the solution because we want to create something. But what problem we will be solving is actually half of the solution. And the way we are going through the process is in different phases. We first create choices, open and look for different opportunities and diverge the space that we're working on. And on the next one, we just start to make choices and focus on a problem or focus on a prototype that we will be creating. And that's the whole process that we will go through. And as we see, the first step is the understand step. And what's actually to understand about? Let me ask you something. If we show this to 5 different people that we just gathered, do you think that if we ask them what this is, they will give a different answer? Probably yes. And some of them might even say that's a snake that ate an elephant. And understanding, that's the moment where we get the challenge. Is it from a manager, from a stakeholder, or from a friend that asks us to find a solution of something? And the moment we get the challenge, even though it sounds really simple, we are all different and we have different perspectives. And since everyone has different experience in his life, we all have a different perception of anything that we see. So that's the moment in the understanding phase when we need to align and to understand and share the understanding of the challenge that we are currently need to work on. And here is one technique how to do the challenge itself. First, the technique is called creative reframing. So we all get the challenge, we write it on the board, and we underline the most important aspects of it that are critical to define in order to continue and to see what's our perception of them. And when do we stop this process? Until we have a shared understanding of the challenge that we need to resolve. And what we have achieved, we all are going in one direction. And to the next phase, to make an observation. And observation, but why do we need observation? Isn't it obvious, the challenge that we need to find a solution for? It already contains the problem, and that's the trap we often fall in, and we don't strive to understand the problem that we need to resolve. And why do we need to observe? Because we need to gain empathy. To gain empathy for the user and to get as many insights as possible so that we really understand the core and the reasons for the problem that he's having. Because if we don't understand the problem or make some assumptions for it, at some point of time he might never use our product. So the first and the easiest thing to gain empathy, we should put ourselves in the shoes of others and see how does it feel to do this particular activity, so that we understand for ourselves what might be the problems of the users. Then the next technique would be ask and listen. That's the standard interviewing, and my favorite one is asking like a kid 5 times why. Whenever they give you an answer, you accept the answer, note it down, and ask again why, and 5 times why, until you realize what's the core and what's the insight of having this behavior of the user. And what's really important when you do interviewing, collect all possible artifacts and note down everything during the interview. And last but not least, right after the interview, make sure that you have a debrief session. And don't go to an interview alone. Take somebody with you to take notes, because even better, you could make even a recording so that you could listen to it again later. But if you don't have the chance to record it, document the interview and do this right after the interview, because even 2 hours later or tomorrow, you would be losing a lot of information that you might remember the moment after the interview. And if you make any assumptions based on the interview, note them down as assumptions and something to validate on the next interview. And try to be as correct as possible to what the users were saying. A book that I would really recommend you for interviewing, it's a book by Steve Portigal. It's related to interviewing users. It's not just a book, it has really a lot of artifacts and examples how to make interview in different environments and different techniques, and it's really a good book. So okay, we learned how to do interviewing after reading this book, and we did our observations, we gathered all the insights that we have, and now it's time to go to the next step, where we have the point of view. But what's actually the point of view about? We already did the observation. Don't we already know what's the problem? We already have ideas in our mind what solution to do, right? Or at least at the beginning I was thinking like this, and I was considering this point of view step. Why do we need to do it at all? But that's actually the most critical step in design thinking, and that's the moment where we identify the specific problem that we want to address with the solution. Because if we don't find the specific problem, eventually we might build something that nobody wants to use, which should be, in the end, complete waste of time. And that's the reason Marvin Liao also is saying that even though we always want to work on the solution and to create something, we don't want to focus on the problem first. before we start working hard, we should identify the problem that we want to resolve. And in order to do that, let's see how do we do this. So we did the interviews. We gathered a lot of insights from the interviews. And what do? Each one from the team that had some interviews starts telling a story about their interview. And while he's telling the story, the others are just noting down the key aspects that they think are important from this interview. And in this way, going through all the interviews that we did, we identify and do some clusterings of all the key findings. And then, after doing clustering of the different findings, we might even identify we have for this product 3 different personas that we should address in different way. But how to do the persona? Here is one example where for particular persona, in my case that was training that had the challenge to define the best vending machine experience for Jane that was working as a PR. And we just split the sheet in 4 and say, who am I, my age, what are my struggle, and what are my wishes. And why would I do this, such persona? Because it will help me a lot in the next step when I need to define the point of view of the persona. And what's actually the point of view? It's a combination of the user, which user, and it should be a specific one, with what need, for what reason. And if we look at example point of view for the persona that I showed you before, in our case, the point of view was that Jane, a skinny, healthy working as a PR, needs to refresh and energize every morning because she just arrived in the office after a morning run. And the insight is very critical. So we knew she's an active person and she's healthy minded person, so the vending machine should offer her some healthy food in an easy way. And there are some traps when we are defining the point of view, and it's very critical that we don't define a point of view for everyone, because during the observation we might have looked at a lot of different people, observed a lot of different users, but we cannot address all the different users' problems with one point of view. And we shouldn't include all the insights that we have found, because we should focus on one problem that we want to resolve. And that one problem is that well-defined point of view that we want to focus our solution on. And why it is critical to have a specific problem, because in the next phase, when we start ideation, then we won't be able to validate which idea, which solution will be better for this problem if we don't have a specific enough and well-defined problem. And having said this, since we chose our problem now, the next phase is the ideation phase, and we see that we're already in the first step of the solution space. And that's the moment when we start thinking what would be the best way to address and to find a solution to the problem. And how do we make ideation? Any ideas? Okay, we do it with brainstorming. And before I tell you what is brainstorming, here are some rules that we need to follow when we do brainstorming. So while doing brainstorming, we should generate as many ideas as possible. We even, during some of our sessions, we did like, okay, let's put a KPI for like 1 hour, doing 3 iterations of brainstorming. Let's have 100 ideas on the board, and that's really very nice, because you start thinking how to generate more and more, and you're not limiting yourself only to feasible ideas, but to anything that comes to your mind. Because sometimes the wildest idea, even though it sounds, come on, we will never do this, it might trigger some thoughts in other team members, so he could come up with an idea that's feasible, and then you can choose this idea later for the solution. And what's also very important, that we defer judgment. We shouldn't judge others' ideas. While we do a brainstorming, we only ask for questions to clarify and understand somebody's idea. What we usually do, let's say we have the challenge how to design the best cooking experience for inexperienced people at home. And what do? We ask how might we improve the experience and start generating ideas. But now I suggest you another kind of brainstorming technique, which is the reverse brainstorming. The reverse brainstorming, we ask the opposite question. How could we make the experience worse for the person? And it's really funny, because you start thinking, okay, how could I make it worse? And and then you'll be surprised how many ideas you could generate in the worsening the experience of the person. But we want to make something better, right? So after generating the worst experience ideas, we need to reverse the negative one into positive one. And then there will come up new ideas that we might have not come up earlier when generating the positive ones. One important tip when we do brainstorming sessions, it's again a tip from an article from Steve Portugal. He's saying that whenever we do brainstorming sessions, we should always do them in 2 waves. So for example, when I gather my team for an ideation meeting, what do? We start, I first explain them the challenge that we want to generate ideas for, and then we have a 5-minute generation of ideas. Everybody staying silent and writing on sticky notes. Then after those 5 minutes, we do a sharing session when everybody's explaining their ideas to the others. And while they are explaining their ideas, everybody's keeping the sticky notes in their hands, because while somebody's sharing, you might come up with another idea and you just put it on the wall while he's explaining his idea. And usually, on the first wave of brainstorming are coming up the low-hanging fruit, the ideas that first come to your mind. And for this reason, after everybody shared their ideas, we need to do a second wave of generation ideas. And usually in this second wave are coming the most ideas that are really innovative and breakthrough, because you're already deep in the context of the challenge that you are thinking for, and then you really come up with something different after having the first wave. Okay, so having said this, we have a wall full of ideas. What do we do next? We need to cluster those ideas and think about which idea we want to prototype. And when we think about prototyping, one of the traps we usually fall in, we think first, oh, let's make the best prototype ever and let's make it perfect because we know how it will look like and we already can imagine the perfect product coming up as a prototype. But that's really a mistake. Whenever we are on this phase of the project, we should always start make the cheapest prototype possible because we want to make as many iterations as possible and do testing as early as possible and fail early and often until we reach a better maturity of the solution that we want to make afterwards. And why do we make prototypes? Because we want to experience the experience of the product that we want to develop later. So the best way to experience it is by making a prototype, even from paper. What kind of prototypes do we have? A prototype could be anything. No, it could be a role play, it could be a poster, anything that would help you explain the idea to someone. And anything that would help you get feedback and be able to test the idea. And a very interesting technique about prototyping is the dark horse prototyping. Why do I like it? Because I was really surprised when I've been using it at one workshop. Do you know the dark horses? Why do we call them dark horses on horse competitions? Because usually the dark horse is the one that we know but that nobody expects to win. The horse that is usually the biggest loser that we throw out very early. But if this horse wins and if you bet money on him, you will be winning the most. So in our case, the dark horse is the wildest idea that we have. The wildest possible that nobody thinks that we could never do this, we could never achieve this. But if we get the wildest idea and start discussing on it and thinking how we might reach a tangible solution out of it, then in the discussion at some point of time you realize, but that doesn't sound so wild anymore. If I can give you an example, in one of the workshops we were discussing how to make an application for people that are searching to rent or buy an apartment. And we were thinking, okay, let's make possible for everyone who is searching for an apartment to make a virtual walking tour in the apartment while staying at home and not wasting time to go to see the apartment actually. And we were thinking, okay, you could do this with Oculus and stuff like this. And after starting the discussion, we reached to a solution that was kind of Facebook with videos and different rights for users and for vendors and so in this way, when you start discussing, and it happens to me also very often, when we have a wild idea, we say, okay, that's not possible, and we throw it away immediately and start thinking on the ideas that we usually expect that will work in our case. Okay, so that's for dark horse prototyping. And another example why we shouldn't afraid to make a lot of prototypes. One of the best designers making home appliances, and he made 5,126 prototypes on this vacuum cleaner. And when seeing this, I thought, okay, how many prototypes do I do on the software applications? And do we do enough iterations? And that's the moment when you realize that learning and making the next prototype, that's the learning curve. And if we shouldn't consider this effort as waste, even if we need to go back in the process, that's the place where we learn. So after having the prototype, what do we do next? We go and test it with users. And what do we do after we spend, let's say, 2 weeks, a month, thinking about how to make a good product? We want to go out and hear only positive feedback. So we start acting as a sellers. Would you like to buy this? Isn't it perfect? Isn't that product great? So do not become seller of what you have developed so far, because at this point of time, in this early stage of the product, you're searching for negative feedback and as much criticism as possible so that you could improve the product the most. And here are some tips how not to sell our product, but to search as much feedback as possible. A really good book on how to ask questions when we go to test our products. That's the MOM Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's a really nice book where he's explaining how to ask different questions when you go and meet customers. And I remember a quote from him where he was saying, every time when I go to a meeting with potential customers, at the end of the meeting, I give them the chance to reject the product. Because for me and for him, rejection is learning. Either this customer is not for me, either I need to do something different to address his needs if I want to address them. So, and that's also part of the learning. And so, if we did the test and we have some feedback, we should go back to prototyping or and test again and iterate until the moment we would say that our product is mature enough and we could go to the implementation phase. But what's more important here, even though we have the process, it's really critical that it's not a process that we should follow blindly, because even if you are in the ideation phase or in the testing phase and we identify that the problem that we identified here in the point of view might be wrong, we shouldn't be afraid to go back, because this is not starting from the beginning. We just found something new that will lead us to a better product later. And I can see it even in myself. You always have this bitter feeling when you need to go back, and it feels like you start from the beginning. But that's very critical to accept that this is the learning that we need to go through to reach a better product. And having said this and all those simple techniques, I came up to this definition of design thinking. And for me, as I experienced it in the last 3 years, design thinking was the tool that helped me realize that I really have the creative power to resolve any problem or find a solution to any challenge that I come across. And that's why I would want you, in order to unleash your creative power, since you're here today, I believe you will be those changing the world tomorrow. In order to do this, you need to do just 3 things. First one of them is to accept failure as essential for learning, and embrace it, and don't be afraid to go back in the process. As we see here, a photographer had 720,000 attempts to make this photo. Probably none of us can appreciate this photo for 6 years effort of this. But whatever we do, we shouldn't afraid of failures. And in order to do this, we should sometimes, not sometimes, but always start acting as a kid. And because when we start acting as a kid, we really are opening our mind to anything that we might come across. It's really fun. Every time when I see it, I start laughing at this. But last and most important thing is, I spoke about design thinking. You could find any other process for making a product that has those steps or other similar steps. And whatever process you see, don't follow the process blindly, because this process is there to guide you and to help you find a better solution. But whenever you think and you need to go to some other step, or you think you don't need to make a certain step because you already have the data for it, then don't be afraid to do it. And the moment you fall in love with the problem that you need to resolve, at that moment there will be no power that can stop you from changing the world. Okay, thank you.